And so this is part 2 of the Talking Sober stream. And on the last stream, I talked about really not how I gave up, but why I gave up. And the thing is, I think Seal put it perfectly. Loneliness is the killer. And for me, I think that's the reason why I became a drinker, why I had a really unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And because I was lonely, because I worked away, I worked in hotels, I worked in different countries, I hardly saw any of my family, maybe once or twice a year. I didn't see my daughter for 5 years, but that's a different story. And yeah, I think it's a painkiller. I think for me, alcohol was a way of not having to think about things. I think if I look at the addiction and I think about what the addiction did, how the addiction took hold of me, but at the same time, how much I drank, how many times I drank, which was all the time and a lot. But then when the circumstances were right, when everything came together, I managed to just stop drinking. I won't say it wasn't easy. Honestly, it wasn't that easy. But I put myself in a situation which made it a lot easier for me. As I said, I moved to a little flat and I made a promise to myself that no alcohol was coming in. Much to the anger of a few of my friends who used to come around to my old house, obviously with beer and whatnot, because they like to have a drink, I like to have a drink, and we used to get merrily pissed and watch stuff on the TV or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I remember one time we were listening to some music because I had a pretty decent hi-fi system, and the flat lent itself to pretty good acoustics where I had it. So I'd invited a couple of friends around, one of them my best friend, and he took it as his night off from his wife. So he came in with like 2 spliffs and like 6 cans of Stella. And I said, "You're not drinking that in here." I said, you're not smoking that in here either. You can go and stand outside on the front, in the yard, and you can drink it and you can smoke it if you want, but you're not doing it in here. And I think, and I've known him for a long time, 20 odd years, and he's always smoked. He's always had the backy, the wacky backy. And I made a note to myself about friends, and I said, friends addicted to something, so they're addicted to something, won't and can't allow your addiction to be real. And I really think that. I think if I admit that I've got an addiction, that I drink too much, then they have to sort of like, the mirror's held against them. And they're saying, yeah, but I don't smoke. And he did. He loved to smoke all the time. I mean, good God. I'm not going to go into details, but he did have a smoke when there any opportunity. And so did his friends, his other friends, outside of my circle. So I came to realize that all these friends that were going and leaving, not leaving, but just not ringing me. I did have one friend who we used to be really good wingmen, and we used to go out all the time. And I remember he was the most upset. Not that he drank that much, but it was just the fact that I'd been such a good wingman. I'd had a few beers, and I chatted women up, as you do when we've got a bit of false courage in you. And he obviously was gaining from my inhibitions, because obviously I wouldn't just talk to one girl, and you never saw one girl together. There'd always be a bunch of them. It's like they're protecting each other. So if I was talking to one of them, he kind of had an in to talk to another one, and he was losing out on that. I think it was Friends, wasn't it, that had the Funny Dave or something like that. And then he gave up drinking, and they're all like, "Oh, you're not funny anymore." And he's like, "Yeah, I know. I'm only funny when I drink. And I'm only like that when I drink. And I only make, I'm obviously, I'm not infallible, but I do make mistakes. I mean, honestly, but nowhere near the amount of mistakes that I made when I was drinking, and not on the same level either. I didn't make horrendous mistakes. I mean, I made horrendous mistakes when I was drinking, but I don't make horrendous mistakes now. I really think about, the consequences and whether it's a good decision. Maybe too much. Maybe I've gone too far to one side, and maybe I'm become indecisive in a way. But what I was trying to get round to is if you decide to stop drinking, and I said this in the last stream when I said, I'm not drinking anymore, to a bunch of friends, and it parted like Moses in the Red Sea. All these friends like, what? Why? You have to realize that you're going to make that sacrifice, that you could end up literally, and I'm not joking, with no friends. Yeah, and that's the truth. And if that's terrifying, it is terrifying. It would be terrifying to me, because my pool of friends, they went from quite a large pool of friends that, tipping your hat to, like saying hello, shaking hands when we were out, and how you doing? Oh yeah, it's a good night, and all this lot. And there's plenty of going on, and I'm having a great time. Just got paid. They were all gone because I didn't see them, and plus I'd moved into the city rather than staying out in the small village. And all the people that I knew who drank, and there was a lot of them, they didn't want really anything to do with me because, well, I didn't want to socialise with them because it's, you're around alcohol. I wasn't anal about it. I wasn't, oh, I don't want to socialise. I mean, I went for a meal a couple of days ago in a pub with some family, and I never thought about drinking. In fact, I had a very funny conversation with my brother because he said, they do non-alcohol. I mean, this is 10 years. I've been sober 10 years. And he said, you do know they do non-alcoholic beers? I said, yeah. I said, but I didn't drink for the taste. He said, well, why did you drink? I said, I drank because I wanted to get shit-faced. And he kind of looked at me as if to say, oh. And that was after, I think, about 4 pints he'd had as quick as he could. But that's all he will do. He'll have 4 pints and finish. He won't, go crazy. He won't, continue to drink. It doesn't, it's not like, almost like a poison where, the more you do it, the more you run, the more you do things, the worse the poison becomes. And you have to drink more. It's not like that. For him, he can go 2 or 3 weeks, a month without having a drink, and then he'll have a drink, and he might have 3 or 4 pints quite rapidly because his window of time for drinking is quite small. So yeah, and I don't begrudge him that. I think that's great. You know, you're able to do that. But for me, no, I can't have one beer. It's the old AA saying, isn't it? Is that one beer's too many, 100 beers isn't enough. And it is true. And yeah, I'm scared of ever having another drink. I got really paranoid about it. Not only about drink, I didn't take any painkillers for nearly 2 years, even though at one point I had excruciating pain, toothache, but I managed to get it sorted really quickly. But yeah, and then one day, I can't remember, I thought, I need to take a couple of paracetamol. I had a flu, or it was around the COVID time. I just thought, I need to take, so I got some paracetamol, and I took 2 of them. I was high. And I swear I was high. And then I had to get a grip on myself and go, oh, you know, you're high. You kind of like, you've just gone from being on death's door to like kind of like, woohoo, you know, doing tapping, listening to some music on YouTube and really like getting into it. And then I realized, yeah, of course I haven't taken any painkillers for 2 years. And now I've just took like 2 500 milligrams of paracetamol, the good stuff. There's no point buying the bad stuff, the cheap stuff. I got the good stuff because I wanted it to act quickly. And woof, did it. But it didn't worry me. Eventually I just went, yeah, well, I'm not going to get addicted to painkillers because I'm not going to take any more painkillers. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, oh, well, that's what everyone says, don't they? They all say that. But no, I'm not. I think what I'm trying to say is I felt like I was in a place where I can take some painkillers it has to be like I'm on death's door or I'm in so much pain that only painkillers would help me. But it goes back to that lecture where on TED where he says, well, Granny breaks her hip, she goes to hospital, they give her diamorphine, which is pure heroin, and she comes out of hospital 6 weeks later, and she's not addicted to heroin. And yeah, she tapers off, the pain's gone, she doesn't relate the pain to the morphine because it's gone, and she's back amongst her family, and all her family and friends are around her, and they're all, you know, fussing her and getting her stuff and sitting with her and talking and all that kind of stuff. And maybe that might be another thing, because that goes on in the hospital, doesn't it? You know, you get visitors and they come in and people show that they care about you. If you're taking heroin in a shitty house amongst people who don't who couldn't care less whether you live or die, yeah, you're going to struggle to stop that heroin after 12 weeks because that's all you've got. You've not got anything else. So going back to the house and where I was, to the flat was fine. The flat was really easy to look after. I told a friend of mine only yesterday, I haven't seen for like 20 odd years. We're having a chat, having a coffee, and I was telling her that about everything, you know, catching up, and we dated years ago, but whatever. And I said, I had one knife, one fork, one spoon, one cup, one bowl, one plate, one pan. And I lived in that flat for 5 years. and the sticker on the oven door was still there. I bought this really cool, it's quite expensive, kind of combination oven, grill, microwave, and I couldn't. It was that was the downside of the flat. It was an electric hob, and I just can't cook on electric, and I just don't. I mean, it's great for the oven because it's, you know, the heat's good, but I didn't bake anything. I wasn't a baker, and I wasn't going to make a lasagna or anything like that. So I got a George Foreman grill and one of these combination microwave oven and grill, and that was all I used. And I used to cook also. Oh, yeah. So also, another thing that I did was that I obviously had a van, and it was the first time in my life that I'd had my own van. And it had the ability, even though I'm like 6'2", had the ability for me to actually sleep in the van. And so I thought, I'm not going to spend the weekends just sitting around watching telly or playing games. I'm going to go out. I'm going to do some walking. So I started walking locally, and it's great because there's loads of footpaths in the city that I live in, and some beautiful areas. And we've got the canal, and it's like, you know, a couple of miles and you're out in the countryside, and there's well looked after walking paths. Obviously, this is like 10 years ago. And then I progressed to getting the kit, getting stuff together, going up to the Lake District or around North Yorkshire, going for a walk, going all day for a walk, just looking at things, whatever. I even bought a camera, a cheap one, it cost me like 300 quid. And I really enjoyed that. Just walking all day on my own. I know this sounds terrible. It's like, oh, you must be really sad because you're walking all day on your own. But no, it's not. No, walking and being and talking and in your own mind. And the other thing is that when you start drinking, you become paranoid about advice. You can get the medical advice, and you can, like, I was lucky. I mean, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I had a friend who was doing psychology at the time. She was still at university, but she didn't have the answers because she wasn't focused on alcohol or addiction. She was focused on other things, and so she couldn't give me any advice on it other than you've got to stop yourself. And I thought that was the only thing. I mean, she must have asked somebody at university, maybe a lecturer, and he turned around and said, yeah, the only person that you can stop for, the only reason you can stop is for yourself, not for anybody else. Other people, stopping for somebody else is not powerful enough. Because if you stop, let's say I stopped drinking because my daughter was crying her eyes out, and, you know, she thought I was going to die and everything. And yeah, okay, I'll stop. Yeah, okay. And then a few years later, she leaves and she doesn't talk to me for some reason. Not that that's happened. I talk to my daughter every day, by the way. And that thing that you gave up for is no longer there in your life. And I know a lot of people who've never had the problem or think they're not having an unhealthy relationship with alcohol would say, well, yeah, but you're off it now, and, you know, you've been sober. If you were sober for a couple of years, why would you go back? And people do. I know that, like, the high failure rate is like within 3 to 6 months of stopping, but there is also a rate of 12 months, 2 years, 4 years, 10 years. There's still people who have given up an addiction, and 10 years later, they've suddenly gone back into it. And is it because of the pull of the drug? Is it because of the chemicals in the drugs? I don't think so. I think it's more than likely is that the circumstances they had before they gave up are now back to that. So if their circumstances change, so they gave up for a good reason because they maybe a family intervention or something like that, and everyone like gathered around, maybe whatever, I don't know. They met somebody. I mean, this is another thing. People can make a choice when they meet somebody that they love more than they love alcohol. But it also is someone that stops them feeling lonely. So there's many, many reasons why they gave up the alcohol when they met the person, or, you know, they got on. But then that person, some reason, is no longer in the life 5 or 6 years later, or 10 years later. Maybe they died, maybe they left, maybe it was a terrible divorce, whatever, I don't know. So, but if you're giving up for yourself, if you're giving up solely because it's you want to do it for you, you want to say you're being very selfish. And I think that's another thing I need to discuss, is how selfish you need to be to give up drinking. If you're so selfish that you don't care about anybody else, only yourself, and that's the reason why you're going to start drinking, because you don't want to die, or you don't want to end up in a coma, or you don't want to smash your head open because you're so drunk you fell down the stairs or anything, fair enough. Do it, and then build relationships afterwards that are stronger relationships with people that don't drink, or, you know, they don't want to be your friend or associate with you because you drink. It's not, you're not socially connected because you're drinking. You might be socially connected because you play dominoes at like the church. And that's another thing that Jordan Peterson said once. And not that I ever went to the AA. I never had a single, you know, meeting at the AA, but Jordan Peterson says, you know, finding God, I don't know how he put it, but yeah, finding God can be one of the most powerful ways of giving up an addiction, because of the power of the addiction of faith, and that faith rules your life. That if you're going to become a person that is, say, a Christian, and the peers around you are Christians because you're in a church, and they're all believers, then, and you look at them as the example, and they follow a Christian life, then you won't drink. And I don't put comments, please, like, yeah, I know plenty of Christians that drink. I'm talking about if you follow the path of Christianity, you won't drink, because I believe that if you are a good Christian and you stick to the tenets of the Bible and what Christianity is, you're a moral person. And that morality is sort of like holding you away from alcohol. I'm not saying people who drink are immoral. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that, because not all Christians are the most faithful Christians. Some of them pick and choose. I mean, it happens in all faiths, not just Christianity. I don't want to knock on about Christianity. I have nothing against faith. I believe that if you've got faith, you're probably a very lucky person, seriously, because I know people who have faith. I have a good friend who's very Christian in her outlook, and she's She's lovely. She's kind. She does things for people. She, you know, she doesn't do it expecting to get anything back. And that's another thing. Is alcohol is a take thing, whereas with her faith, she doesn't take and she doesn't drink, and it's not because she doesn't like to drink, because I believe that she might have been a bit of a drinker when she was younger before she found God, but she doesn't drink because she doesn't believe that she's going to be a good Christian if she gets drunk and does the things that she did when she wasn't a Christian. Does that make sense? So those morality the morality in her mind, those laws of morality, keep her sober and have kept her sober for a lot of years. So I'm whisking back and I'm going backwards and forwards, and I do this. I ramble one way and the other. But I was trying to get to a point with the going away and walking. Yeah, so I did that. I didn't have a huge amount of money, but I didn't need it because I wasn't spending any money on campsites or anything like that. And I used to take all the food with me. I used to make butties up and all that lot, and a little stuff. I used to make myself brews, and I used to sit there and I used to read, and I read a lot. I in the van, I was really lucky because there was like a backlight that had been added into it that you could switch on a 12 volt, which was quite powerful, and I could read. And I just took my sleeping bag and one of those like foam toppers. It wasn't as comfortable as I thought it was going to be, but it was comfortable enough. And yeah, and I just like, it wasn't every weekend, but it was something that I thought, oh, you know, it's something I could have done, and it wasn't going to cost me. It cost me the price of a couple of gallons of diesel, and I wasn't paying full price for diesel at the time anyway, because my mate was giving me money because I was using the van for work. So like he'd always give me way too much money for the diesel that I needed to go and do the jobs. So I kind of like accrued a bit of mileage which I could use, and I'd only be eating the food when I was at home, and I wasn't using the electric. So it actually may have been a win. It may have saved me some money. The thing was, I met a lot of people when I was doing it, and my mum, she used to do a lot of camping in the caravan, and she knew all the campsites around there, and she told me that there's a little farm I'm not saying where, but there was this little farm, and they had about 6 caravans on it. It had no electricity or anything, but they did have, you couldn't hook the electricity up to the caravan, but what they did have was showers and hot water and toilets. And I thought, oh, that's not a bad idea, bad shout at all. And she says, oh, I know him, and I'll give him a ring, and I'll see if... Anyway, it turns out that the old guy who ran it years ago, when she went with the caravan, taking my granddaughter actually, had passed away, but it was his daughter who'd taken over, and she was quite, she said, oh yeah, just pop up. We don't get that many people on there anymore. And so I'd gone up there, and I knocked on the door and I said, hello, my name and whatever, and it was my mum had rang, and she said, you'd be really kind to let me have a shower because I'm staying overnight. And she said, yeah, where you going to park the van? And I said, there's a lay-by just down there. Oh, don't park it there. People, oh no, you get idiots driving up and down, and they're just looking for people sleeping in vans and things and rob them. And I was like, what? Middle of nowhere. And then I thought, yeah, it is the middle of nowhere. It is middle of nowhere. So, I'm quite vulnerable. And she said, just park it here. Anyway, at that particular time, on that particular weekend, there were 6 caravans. and they were all sort of like, they all knew each other, and they were all like middle-aged couples whose kids had grown up and gone and didn't want to go camping because it was, they couldn't get any Wi-Fi out there or 3G or 4G. And so they saw me there cooking my baked beans on a camp stove and asked me if I'd come over, and I went, yeah, thanks, yeah. And I was saying that, and he was saying, why are you on your own? I know people say that, and especially like at our age, people tend to be dead nosy about this. Why did you decide to come out on your own? I said, well, I like being on my own. I like to, it gets my head together. And I told them all, because they were all sat around, on your typical camp chairs with the white tables. And I said, I gave up drinking. I drank for 25 years, and like, this is like the first year of my sobriety. And they were like looking at me as if to say, that's amazing. And that's what they said. Like, that's really good. Blah, blah. And I couldn't believe it, but none of them drank. They weren't like non-alcoholic. They weren't ex-alcoholics or ex-drinkers. It was just the fact that they were all friends through something. I think it was something to do with cards. They played cards. And they all realised that when they were playing cards, that people were drinking a lot, because it was like, oh, we're night out, time to get pissed and all this lot. And they'd end up gravitating to one table. So all six of them, there was more than six. I think, was there 4 caravans on and 2? That's it, 8. So there was 8 of them on the card table, and they all played, and none of them drank. They all drank. And it wasn't, like I said, they'd never been drinkers. They'd just never been drinkers. They just never thought about it. They weren't Methodists or anything like that, or Prohibition. They literally, it was a life choice. My mum doesn't drink. My mum just never drank. She's just one of those people that, she just doesn't drink. She might have half a lager once every 6 weeks with something to eat, only because she finds it very, she now likes half a cider, and she takes an hour and a half to drink it, because it's just a drink to her. It's not alcohol. It's not a way of getting pissed. It's just, oh, yeah. And these were the same. And they did have a drink now and then. And they had a few cans. And I think they all sort of like, I think out of the 8 of them, 4 of them had one can. I think, that was right. It was a 4-pack of lager someone had brought. And everyone who wanted a lager put the hand up and had one. And in fact, one of the guys said to me, this doesn't bother you. I won't drink it if it bothers you. And I said, look, man, I've got to live my life, and other people have to live their life. And I've got to be able to navigate through other people, because drinking is so prevalent, so part of society, so part of socializing. I have to be able to sit down in a pub when other people are getting pissed, and I have done. And believe me, it's an experience. If you drink now and you really drink a lot, and one day you go out, it's horrible. But anyway, going back to that, we just talked, and they're saying, one of them was saying, yeah, well, my dad didn't talk. My dad didn't drink. My mum and dad didn't drink. They didn't they went out and they went socializing and all that lot, and they might have had like half a glass of wine and a pint of beer, but that was it. And then they wouldn't drink outside the socializing. They wouldn't drink unless they were going to a party or something like that, and that was rare enough. Or they were going for a nice meal, but they didn't have enough money to like go for nice meals like all the time. So it was like payday or whatever, or at the end of the month, they'd go out for a meal and maybe drink a bottle of wine between them, and that was like the most they'd ever done. And I was getting all these stories off people and how they gravitated together, how they'd like moved from one table to the other, and they've been talking afterwards and saying, I noticed that he was getting really smashed at your table. Yeah, well, he likes to have a drink. That's what he comes out. It's his drinking time. He gets away from the wife and all right, well, why don't you come and sit on our table? Because we don't drink. And there's like 4 of us. And so that was another couple came over, and then the same thing happened again, and then there was the 8 of them. And eventually they realized that it was the socializing. They didn't need to go to the club, to like the working men's club where they had this card night on, because the only reason why they were going to the working men's club for the card night was most of them, the other people were going there because there was alcohol. They could drink. So they decided to have these like nights back at their place and rotate it around. And I thought that was just brilliant. And it really, how can I put it? Humanity, I felt, was starting to balance. The world was, the balance of the world was starting to correct itself. And there was a lot more times after that. And maybe it's because I was looking for them more than anything. It's that blue, was it the red car thing where, you buy a red car and then you notice all the cars are red, or all the red cars. Or you buy a Ford Focus and you realize, and then you start noticing Ford Focuses. And maybe it's because I gave up drinking, I noticed people who didn't drink, who sort of like, when you said to them, I don't drink, and they go, yeah, I don't either. I stopped drinking years ago. It's just too expensive. And I was like, yeah, it's that and a lot more. But that's a good enough reason. And so not only, like I said, when I gave up drinking for the first time, I lost loads of weight. Oh, it just tumbled off me. But I wasn't in a good condition. Like I said, I had high blood pressure. My kidneys not working my liver's not functioning properly. But I love walking. I walked. This is probably information that nobody needs to know, but I used to walk to a train, which was 1.5 miles. I used to get on a train to a town where my school was. That was like a 30-minute journey. And then I used to walk 2 miles to the school. And then twice a day, you'd walk 0.5 mile because you had to walk from the upper school to the lower school twice a day. That's how they stop you from like getting into mischief, because everyone had to walk 1/4 mile. It was a 1/4 mile distance between both. And you'd do one lesson in the upper school, one lesson in the lower school. And then you go back up to the upper school, back down to the lower school, have your lunch. And then you do the same thing again twice. So, no yard time. Got treated worse than criminals. Oh, at least I got some fresh air, I suppose, and exercise. And I did that 5 days a week, obviously term time, for 5 years. And where I lived, when I went to school, there's an old saying: you're either going uphill or you're going downhill. There's no flat. And it is on the side of a hill. The whole thing is on the side of a hill. You look down into a valley and you're living on the side of the valley. And yeah, I used to walk up and down there, and then at night, I walked from where I lived down into the village, and that was 1 mile, and then walked around with your mates, when you're like 12, 13. I mean, I don't think they do it now. And or going to your mate's house, like have a brew or a can of pop or something. Oh, they didn't have cans of pop then, really. Bottles of pop. And then have to walk back up at night, back home. Well, not night, maybe 7 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock. And so I got the mileage in, I got the steps in. So walking for me, once I got over the first initial couple of times that I did like 3 miles, 4 miles, and then absolutely couldn't even lower my arse onto the toilet because my legs and my ass was so much in pain because I'd just not done any exercise for years, for at least a year. After that, after I got over the initial pain, I just started to love it. And maybe I was becoming obsessed with it, but I was walking. And the office that my friend had was about 2 miles away. And it was a decent walk, it was flat. And if he asked me to come in the office, like say, oh, Dave, can you come in on like Friday or whatever at 2 o'clock? I'd say, yeah. Do I need to go anywhere afterwards? And if he said no, I'd walk. Crazily enough. And I'd been watching these, like, this guy, I don't know who he is. He's probably some famous YouTube influencer at the moment, but he wasn't at the time. I think he had like 1,500 viewers, but he was one of the first people to get one of the fitness watches. You know, I think it was an Apple one, and he was saying, I set a goal of 10,000 steps a day, so I'm walking around the living room brushing my teeth so I can get some steps in. He said, I go to the mall, because he's an American. I go to the mall and I park on the car parking space as far away as I can from the front door, and I walk. And all these different things. When I don't have my lunch at my desk anymore, I walk to the park and I sit down and I have my lunch, and then I walk back, and I know exactly how far I can get and back in half an hour. So 15 minutes, or let's say 10 minutes walk, eat your food, 10-minute walk back. And I was starting to do all them kind of things. I started to say, right, well, the shop is a mile away, yes, and it's not the nicest neighborhood, but I could walk it and get the food and come back. And that's what I was doing. So on top of the huge amounts of sugar that's in Coca-Cola and the huge amounts of sugar that's in alcohol, which is, I don't know, someone said it's like almost pure sugar is alcohol. And all the calories in the sort of like nasty kebabs and fish and chips and stuff that I wasn't eating, all that had gone away. And the walking and the beer's the worst, the carbohydrates in the beer. No wonder people get beer guts. I don't know, I must have like halved my calorie intake and increased my exercise exponentially. So I was starting to lose weight to the point where one day I had to wear a suit and tie to go to see a customer. And it's probably, I don't know, 3-4 months. No, it had been 3 months since I'd wore a suit and tie. And I got all like ready, ironed the shirt, whatever. The night before, hung it all up on the wall, made sure my shoes were polished, got everything on, and my belt, it wasn't even on the last hole, it was beyond the last hole, and I couldn't keep my pants up. That's how rapid weight loss. In fact, it worried my mum more that I'd lost so much weight because I wasn't seeing her as often. Because I was doing this like sort of like isolation and getting my head together. So I wasn't seeing her, but I was talking to her all the time. I was always on the phone to her, and I was always on the phone to my dad, and I was always on the phone to like one or two of my best mates. They're like the three friends out of like the 30 that had sort of like stuck with me. So we were always chatting. So I wasn't isolating in that way. And I did have those friends would pop around and have a brew with me and whatever. And maybe they were just being socially friendly, or maybe they were worried about me. I don't know. Honestly, they've never admitted to it to this day. But I was like, what am I going to do? So I had to, I was in plenty of time. I've always been the kind of person that I don't like being late for anything. I feel, honestly, I wouldn't, I don't want people to do to me what I would do to them, or what, in other words, I wouldn't want anyone to be late if I asked them and they agreed to be there on time. I'd take that as an insult, unless they had a really good excuse. So I wouldn't want people doing to me what I wouldn't do to other people. And that irks me a lot. It's one of the things that I've always been like. I either don't make a promise, and I'm very sort of, that's another thing about my personality, is if I can't make a promise, I'll say no. I won't try and get away with it. I won't like sidestep it by saying, yeah, I'll be there, knowing full well that there might be a chance I can't do it. I'd say, I'll tell you the truth, I won't be able to do it if this happens. And it's up to you. So, yeah, I'll try my best, but I might not be able to do it. And so I had plenty of time before I had to see this client, and they were in the same city as me. And quite honestly, I knew where it was, and the parking was really easy because they had their own parking space. It was a solicitor's. So I knew I was going past the supermarket on the way to see the client. But I had to jump in the car, and I was holding my pants on when I was walking into the supermarket and going, and people were looking at me. They literally were looking at me because they thought I had the shits. I'm sure they did. Like, because one woman's like, "Are you all right? You need the toilet," or something like that. Well, she didn't say that. She didn't say, "Do you need the toilet?" She says, "Are you all right? You're looking for something." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I need a belt for these." Oh. She's like that. Yeah, okay. They're down here. I'll show you. Quick. Anyway, I had to because she was fussing around me. She got the belt and sort of like wrapped it around me. You know, these days, you probably, next minute, you're on your face, handcuffed, like, you know, being kicked, being called like I don't know, a nonce, whatever. But back then, I didn't think twice about it. And it's a northern thing as well. Northern women are definitely built differently. They don't have like this, they're not, anyway, let's not get into that. But so she's wrapped it around my waist, and it's like, oh, that'll do, right. And I'm saying, right, I'll have to hold it with that hand, and then I reverse tuck it into the belt hoops, and then hand over, and then I'm pushing it through, and she's like, stop, just here, and started putting it through around me. I mean, she was probably 60, and I put it, oh, yeah, that's fine, thank you very much, right. I said, I've got it on now, I'm going to pay for it. And she's like, just take the tag off and scan it. I was like, good idea. So I went over, and there was a security guard on. There was a security guard, and it's someone I don't, it's one of those people I know, I've talked to, kind of like in a passing. He's a friend of a friend of a friend, and he's a beautiful, big, like, he's like, proper built like a boxer, West Indian guy. And I've got this tiny little tag, and I scanned it, and then obviously I couldn't put it on to weigh it on the other bit, on the scales, so that it, and I thought, oh, you idiot, you need to give it to one of the, one of the checkout girls, and then say, "This belt, I've just bought it," and explain it to her, and I hadn't, and it started beeping, like, please place the item on the weighing scales, and he's looking at me, and I said, "I've just bought this belt. I've just realised I can't do self checkout. I need to take it over to the checkout girls and get it through there, or checkout man, either one." And he's just like laughing. He started laughing, that beautiful laugh, like a rumbling laugh. And I did. And he just went, "Yeah, go on, man. Just take it over. Don't worry. I'll tell the girl when she comes over what's happened." So I took it over. I said, "I've just bought this belt, and there's the tag. Can I pay for it, please?" And she's like, "Yep." But never batted an eyelid. Never asked anything. It could have been anything. It could have been a tag for anything, I suppose. Well, mind you, it probably came up on her screen. Paid for it, got in the van, went to the client, sorted everything they wanted, all the plans they wanted to do, and then went back, told my mate. He was laughing his head off. But he also said, "But isn't that a brilliant thing to have happened?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" Toddling around like a supermarket, holding on, looking like I'd shit myself and I'm looking for toilets. He said, "No, mate. Sometimes bad things mean it's really a good reason." And the good reason was that you'd lost all that weight. And I bet your blood pressure's like lower now. And I thought, "Oh, I never thought about that." And he's saying like, "And I bet your heart rate is better. I bet you're sleeping better at night and all that, because the fitter you are, the better your sleep is, And I'm like, yeah. I didn't go completely cold turkey on sugar, though. I did like a bit of sugar. I was a bit of, and still am, to be honest. I kind of like swapped chocolate for alcohol. I believe that's true. Yeah. So I am sort of addicted to chocolate, but so are most of my friends, which is, maybe I have to get off chocolate at some point. But I've got it down now to only eating like 98% dark chocolate. And I've got a real taste for it. I like it. I do. And I don't eat anywhere near. I can, like a bar of chocolate, dark chocolate, I can last me for like 3 or 4 days, no problem. Whereas I got like 6 Kit Kats in a packet and they wouldn't last me 6 hours. And that's sad. And yeah, it was. He was right. He was right. He was the one that told me that alcohol is a thief of dreams. And it sort of stuck in my head. He went into that little book of like things that were starting to push me towards stopping this misuse. Not misuse. I was thinking about this in the van today. Misuse. Yeah, the substance abusers. They're not abusing the substance. The substance is abusing them. That sounds controversial, I know, but yeah, because the substance is being taken by that alter personality, the other personality. And the more you take the drugs, the more that personality gets a grip. That's why you have to talk to yourself and fight. So my health was starting to increase, starting to get better. Increase isn't the right route, because I don't think your health does increase. I think it just gets better, or it becomes better. And I was starting to feel good about myself. That's another thing. And I realized 3 months, I'm 3 months in. And when I told people, my God, they were like, not sort of like, yeah, people I knew through doing a bit of work here and there, and work colleagues who sort of suspected that, in my old job, who sort of suspected that I was an alcoholic because I stunk of like alcohol every single day. but couldn't quite, was he, or did he just like to have a drink later on, like whatever, and he smelled a bit, I don't know. But no one ever tackled me on it. No one ever said it. And that's another thing that I always used to say about one of the reasons why I'm not saying get away with being an alcoholic, but there were very few consequences of me drinking a lot. And one of those reasons was that the job I did, it was a very specific niche job. And the more that you did it, the more you became higher up on the list of a few people that did it. So the more contracts you did working with that particular product, the more you were sort of like, they wanted you because, oh yeah, he's how many years of experience has he had with? The first time I did it, I had no experience, and I just kind of fell into it because the guy who was doing it left and without any word, and someone had to do it. So I had to learn how to do this, how to work this application, how to do the programming. But then after that, I put it on my CV, not thinking, I told my contract manager, and he put it through and said, "Oh, hey, you're going to earn a bit more money. You're going to earn a decent amount more money with this on. Can you do it?" Like, yeah. I'm sort of up to date on it. Not everything, but up to date. Next contract, and then obviously, then it's 6 months experience or 9 months experience, and then it's 12 months experience, and then it's 2 years experience, and suddenly you're putting down on your CV that you've got 2 years experience of this niche application that's like only for certain things. Won't go into it, but so you start to bounce up the list of people. So you get to 3 months, let's say 2 months before the end of your contract. You've got a 6 months contract. Most of my contracts were 6 to 12 months. I never did less than 3, and I never did, only with one, and that was my last contract. I did more than 1 year. But you get to like 2 months before the end of your contract, and he was already getting phone calls off people because they knew you'd finished the contract, because they knew your CV. They'd tried to get you to do the contract for them like 6 months ago. They knew that you would be up for renewal and possibly not getting your contract renewed, so you'd be available. So they're trying to get me to write a contract to go and work for them 2 months before my actual contract had expired, and I didn't know if I was going to have a renewal. And I would never, if they wanted me to renew, I would renew, because obviously the project wouldn't have been finished. So it was like, yeah, I'll do another 3 months or whatever. I mean, I did one contract once in the government, and I literally, we were on the edge. We were right up to the deadline, and we were going to get it in on time, and something switched. Somebody high up decided that they wanted these things changed. They didn't like it. I think it was like someone had left the civil service, and another civil servant had come in and said, "Oh no, that's no good. I want these changes done." And so at the last minute, they said, "Can you make these changes?" And I was like, "Yeah." "How long is it going to take you to make these changes?" I said, "I don't know, until I get all the specs, until everything comes down." "Right. Well, we'll have to renew your contract." Well, a minimum renewal on a contract like that is 3 months. And when I got them, I realised there was only about a week's worth of work. And I was thinking, gee, what? And I'd signed the contract for 3 months. So I went back to the boss at the time, and I said, I'm going to be sat around for like 2.5 months doing nothing. If you know, because there's not enough work here. What they want is only a week's worth of work. He said, all right, okay, I'll discuss it with my boss. And they said, and before I went, he went, you're not going to leave, are you? I said, no, but you've got to realise that I've signed this contract for another 3 months, that I'm going to be sat around doing nothing because there's nothing else to do in that department that I can do, because it's all very esoteric stuff, really esoteric stuff. And he said, I'll have a word with my boss. Yeah. So that was it. And about half an hour later, he phones me and said, just pop up to the canteen. A really fantastic canteen as well. Just pop up to the canteen and I need you to meet, I need you to talk to my boss. I can't remember what his name was, but anyway, I think it was Andy or something like that. So I went up to the canteen, sat down, having a cup of tea, as you do, English, bricky tea as well, 2 sugars of milk. And he said, the big boss said, look, I don't want you to leave. I need you to finish these edits. I said, I know, but I was trying to make out to my boss that if I end up, if those edits are only going to take me a week to do, and I'll be sat around doing nothing for like 2 months and 3 weeks. And I'm like not the kind of person that does that. All right. Oh, right. Oh, he's like, yeah, that's not a problem. Put you on gardening leave. And I said, no. The problem is that if you put me on gardening leave, I can't sign another contract. And if you break the contract, you'll have to pay out the full 3 months and I'll leave. But that doesn't look good for me either, because you've broken the contract. So we were in a bit of a dilemma meeting. And he said, I'll ring up he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll ring up your contract manager and we'll see what we can work out. I said, in the meantime, he said, can you get on with these edits? And I went, yeah, not a problem. So went back to the office, started on the edits. And my contract manager rang me. He said, Dave, when you finish them edits, you can go. And I went, what? He said, yeah, they're just going to pay you out. And they're going to like give you a really good like reference and say it was their fault. They made the mistake. They overtime contracted it because of a mistake that was made by somebody else. I was like, whoo, nice. So I'm going to get 2 months and 3 weeks pay for nothing. Yes. All right. Where's really sunny this time of year? Australia. It's always sunny. All right. Have you any contracts in Australia? Well, it just so happens. And yeah, that was my Australia adventure started. Anyway, it's been an hour now and I've rambled on. And I actually have someone who's followed me. IEFCWUM. Quum. Yes. Yeah, it's a good English name, that. Yeah. I think it's quite old. I think it goes right back to Harold or something like that. IEFCWUM. So, thanks for following. Part 3 will be just another ramble, as it is, because that's all I do. I don't really have any notes. I have a few notes. I don't know why I have any notes, because I never look at them. But yeah, the next one will be just another ramble. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye.